Good afternoon, everyone. Um, what I go by the name Sotadeology. In today's life, I want to share something so profound with you guys. So, it's a novel field, a novel study field, and that is going to be in science. So, that field, I call it Sotadeology. Sotadeology, it has to do with flipping mechanism of the universe, both scientifically and artistically. But I say scientifically and artistically simply because there are two flipping mechanisms in the universe. There is this dimensional flipping mechanism. It has to do with shapes. So there is another flipping mechanism that is called relativistic flipping mechanism, and that has to do with smooth convergence, which has to do with mass formation. Now, these two flipping mechanisms are so essential to instantiate an entity in the universe. So whatever shape that you could see, whatever crystal formation you could see, whatever smooth mass convergence, whatever it is that can actually be seen, be felt, that particular thing must, actually inculcate this two flipping mechanism for it to be, manifested. So I will still go so deep into, the flipping mechanism, but when you look at the fabric of the universe, because the whole dimensional structure of the universe is so interwoven, into the fabric of the universe, and that, develops the structural formation of the universe. This what I'm sharing with you as this what I'm sharing with you as mathematical formalism. It is not just based on theoretical explanation or illustration. It is based on mathematical formalism. It is as well based on time energy wave model that serves as visual representation of the happenings in the universe. But I have two research publications on ijser.org, which is a peer-reviewed journal. So now there I have the time theory of the universe, and then I have seen the anatomy of quantum gravity through formula of everything. Those are the two scientific research publications on peer-reviewed journal that you can actually have access to and get that research publication and even work more on it. So now the formula I use to unify quantum mechanics to classical mechanics is what I call FOE, or you can call it simply formula of everything. Formula of everything. That formula is so powerful that it feeds back on itself. That simply means that when you use an input to generate an output, you can as well use the generated output as input to generate further output. So it's a powerful formula. So what formula of everything does is that it gives us the position of quantum mass instantiation in relation to the corresponding classical mass position. You understand? So when you say, for instance, you put the mass worth of electron into the formula by application will give you the corresponding classical mass worth. Now, if you now use that classical mass worth to reconfirm the quantum mass worth, it will give you, for instance, let's say the mass worth of electron that you initially entered. Let's say that mass worth was 9.109 times 10 raised to power minus 31. To reconfirm that electron's mass, when you supply the classical mass worth, you will get 9.109 times 10 raised to power minus 32. So it won't be the actual value of electron, because the trajectory of time, which is the vertical connection from the classical realm down to the quantum realm, that trajectory is one-way traffic trajectory. You can't traverse that trajectory two times because there is a suspension at quantum region that if you go through that suspension, it will lead to radiation, and that would lead to decay. You can see the effect of that decay on that particular value by making it to be, making it to be the power of minus 32. So it has been decayed by the mass worth of minus 1 at the power level. And that shows the flow of time. So time is moving right from, classical down to the quantum. And that simply means that time is flowing from the past to the future. So by applying that formula of everything, even when we have the trajectory of time to be vertical, which we can call instant trajectory, we still have the flow of time to be from the classical down to the quantum, and even beyond the quantum realm to, complex level or into complex system. So now, this formula is so powerful, but then by applying the formula and then by using time energy wave model, I get to know that the entitle of the universe is being dimensionally structured, and the dimensions are being flipped, interlocked into one another. That is the structure of the universe. Now, this flipping mechanism, the study of that flipping mechanism, is what I call Sotadeology. Now, the Sotadeology is actually coined from my own surname, which is Sotade. But the story is not, limited to me as the inventor of that novel study in science. Back in 256 AD era, there was one particular Greek poet called Sotadeus. So he invented the kind of poem that is called palindromic poem. So the kind of poem that you can flip such that when you read it from right to left, it can as well be read from left to right. So palindromic poetry was developed by that Greek poet known as Sotadeus. So when I now develop the formula of everything and then discover the flipping mechanism. So I decided to title the novel field of science, because it integrates art into science in the sense that we have the dimensional flipping mechanism and as well have the relativistic flipping mechanism. The relativistic flipping mechanism has to do with science, which is the scientific part, and then the dimensional flipping mechanism has to do with art, which is the artistic part. So it deals with shape formation, then the flipping of shapes and all that. Now, this particular image that we have right here above my head, we're going to use that image to illustrate further the kind of flipping mechanism I'm trying to share with you guys. So now, one thing I want us to know is that for any shape to be manifested, there must be a combination of this relativistic flipping mechanism and then the dimensional flipping mechanism. And so at the extreme end of the shape, there will be this arbitrary mass convergence, because the edge of the shape must be locally instantiated for the shape to be manifested. You understand? And so basically, this flipping mechanism that is discovered in the fabric of the universe is so essential for us to really have the clear picture of what reality is. So now, it's a novel field. It's a field that I'm actually proposing. So if adopted, then it's going to be a kind of field where you can get to know what consciousness is, because formula of everything has, opened our eyes to what consciousness is, the reality of consciousness. So I have a couple of videos on my YouTube channels. On my YouTube channel rather. When you visit the YouTube channel, you can get under the description any of my video. If you get access to any of my videos, at the description section you can get to see the links to my research publications, link to my video on YouTube, link to my Facebook account, link to my LinkedIn account. So link to all my social media. You can get link to all of them in the description below. And then the publication is right there. You too can explore that publication to know. You can explore the mathematical formalism to see if truly that mathematical formalism is, genuine. So right now we have a kind of theory that is, falsifiable, that is testable and verifiable. So I implore all the mainstream scientists to go and get a copy of this research publication and work on it. So I will briefly talk about what the flipping mechanism is all about, because with the flipping mechanism I'm able to get the true nature of dimensions of the universe. So now, if I'm to briefly explain, dimensions and how they are interlocked into one another to really crystallize the shape formation of the universe, which is more or less like the intrinsic structure of the universe. I would rather say that, for instance, if you have 1D, for that 1D to be manifested as 1D, right on that horizontal line, let's say it's an horizontal line. So we're going to have relativistic relationship right from the middle of that horizontal line, such that we have trajectory towards the other side and then another trajectory towards, so let's say we have trajectory towards the left side and then another trajectory towards the right side. So that trajectory from the center towards the right and the left, that is the relativity that is embedded right inside the dimension. The one dimension is what I'm talking about right now. So this relativity has to be inversely related. And so we now have that trajectory as such. So when it gets to the extreme end of the left and the right, then we're going to have another kind of, flipping mechanism that will converge such that the entirety of the inversely traversed trajectory will now be instantiated as arbitrary mass convergence. So when we now have that point at the extreme ends, which is at the extreme end of the left and the extreme end of the right, then we now have the 1D. The point which we call arbitrary mass convergence will serve as the singularity of the left. Let's just call it singularity of the left now, and then the other right will serve as singularity of the right. So now we need to know that the point that we have, which is the localized region, the one at the left will be arbitrary, while the one on the right will be the real mass convergence. So we have arbitrary mass convergence, and then we have the real mass convergence. Why must this be so? I get to know this reality by applying formula of everything. I get to know that we usually have two singularities in the universe, and that is why in the Schwarzschild, the Schwarzschild solution of general relativity, you could see that in that solution it discovered two singularities. We usually have two singularities. There is Big Bang singularity and there is black hole singularity. That is, if you are to look at it horizontally. But in the case where we have instant trajectory of time, where we don't have vertical trajectory, then we're going to also have one arbitrary singularity, which would initially be at the classical level, and then the real mass convergent singularity, which will be at the quantum level. So we have it like that. But the solution that we get, which scientists usually call, that when we now have collapse of waves, that we're going to have the instantiation of particle. The particle they usually refer to is not obtainable right within the quantum realm or at the quantum level. The particle they have access to is at the complex level, and that particle is the antiparticle of electron. But I will still share more in this channel. So I want people to, join this channel so that people can benefit more. Because here, I will be speaking in a layman language such that we'll be able to understand the solution which I've discovered through the mathematical formalism or formula of everything. I will, speak in layman language such that we'll be able to understand, and then we'll be able to, get the fact of things that are happening around us. So now, formula of everything is not being called formula of everything for nothing. It is indeed formula of everything because the answer it gives is more than what I envisage. So right now, by studying Sotadeology, that is when it is eventually adopted by the mainstream scientist or by the mainstream science, when you study Sotadeology, you will get to know what consciousness is. So right now, I know what consciousness is, and I even have a video on it. I can tell you where consciousness is being gotten from, you understand? And I can even tell you the internalization process that would make that consciousness to be a personal experience. There is this argument about subjective reality, objective reality. The thing is, scientists believe that consciousness should be personal. It has to be subjective because, what one might be conscious of, could be different from what other person might be conscious of. So, for instance, if two persons are observing, market scene, one might be conscious of somebody that is hawking on the street, while the other might be conscious of somebody that is, playing mixtape by the roadside, things like that. So the consciousness will be personal to either of them, you understand? And I must tell you that consciousness transcends the jurisdiction of our brain. Consciousness is obtained at complex level, and this consciousness is getting connected to a missing piece and then instantly transmit or run a feedback to the classical mass worth. And once classical mass worth is able to assimilate that or absorb that, it becomes a conscious feeling. Now it is gotten from outside, even outside the time energy wave model, but it gets internalized such that every human can then, experience it as a personal phenomenon. But that is a topic for another day. it's a topic on consciousness. You understand? So now, if I'm to say, if I just want to try to prove that theoretically, of course that is being proved mathematically by applying formula of everything. But theoretically, I would rather say that every human has mind, and then the workings of the mind is beyond our physical realm. You understand? And so, neuroscientists, they discovered that the brain could, crystallize dimension even to the 11th dimension while processing information. So basically, there is this connection between mind and the brain. But the scope of mind, the working scope of mind, is far beyond the limit of, our brain. So that is why, right by applying the formula of everything, I was able to discover that everything in the universe is interconnected. Everything in the universe is interconnected. So we have this tapestry of interwoven network in the universe. So every human might be interpreted or be seen as independent entity. But if you scrutinize every human, you see that we are one way or the other connected to one another, but that connection might not be something that is visible, but it is right there. Just as you're looking at me, you could see me the way I am, but basically I radiate an infrared light which human eyes cannot see. You understand? So there are some things that we cannot see with our physical eyes that are part of us. So now, Sotadeology is a powerful field, because by studying Sotadeology, we get to know what consciousness is. We get to know what free will is. These are tough topics. These are topics that mainstream scientists struggle with. But I can tell you that all these things, they are in existence and they function. And so there is a proof of how formula of everything could be applied to, get the functionings and the workings of all these hidden things. So you get to know what the free will is. You get to know what consciousness is. You get to know what life is. You get to know what death is. So these are the major issues in science. Basically, the issue of consciousness is something that, many people believe that scientists should be able to decipher. Being a scientist, consciousness is something so tangible that we use to even read meter, to do whatever it is that we say we do as a scientist. And as a result of that, they believe scientists should be able to, tell what consciousness is. So now I must tell you that when you look at all these things I've been saying, you might say there are things that that are not real, that they are not possible. They are indeed possible. With God, everything is possible. So, these things are inspired by Almighty God. They are not things that you can use your own intellect to decipher. So, they are things that when you are being inspired by God, such that you have clear intuition about, the next thing to do, the proper mathematical formalism to put in place. So when you are in connection with God, you will know the proper mathematical formalism to use. Not only that, you will even know how to interpret your result. So I have clear interpretation for all the discoveries, and I've been sharing that. And there was a time that I even challenged the mainstream scientists to that if there is anyone who has a better way to explain the reality of the universe than what I explained in one of my uploaded videos, which was about reality, that the person should come forth, and if that is genuinely supported mathematically, then I will bow as a sign of respect for that scientist God. So, and if that is not the case, if my own explanation of reality as it is being supported by mathematics is genuine, then that particular scientist will have to bow as a respect for my own God. And my God is I am that I am, Jehovah, Almighty God, the God of the universe, the beginning and the end of everything. So that is not to worship my God, neither to worship that mainstream scientist God. It is just a sign of respect for that outstanding discovery. And that honor will go to whatsoever that mainstream scientist believes in. And that honor will go to the God that I believe in. So, by the time I go deep into all these things, because I'll be having periodic live session like this, by the time I go deep into consciousness, free will, life, death, and things like that, you will get to know that indeed all these things are functioning and they are in existence. They are not things that are not in existence. For instance, when somebody is being operated on, or for instance for someone that is in a coma, there are cases of near the death experience that the spirit of the person would have left the body, and probably maybe there is a surgeon conducting a surgical operation on that particular person in coma. Eventually, when that person now gets resuscitated, the person would relate, the experience, how the surgeon performed the surgical operation and things like that. And everything would be so perfect that even the surgeon would not be able to deny the fact that the person was at that point in time, experiencing everything that he did. You understand? So there are cases like that. And that is to tell you that the scope of consciousness is far beyond the limit of our brain. Even at a point like a vegetative state, when the patient is in a kind of state that the brain, nothing is working, the brain is not working, nothing is working. There are several cases of having such person witnessing what is actually going around the whole vicinity, and if eventually the person was resuscitated or revived, and then the person will relate the experience, and it will be to the amazement of the people that were around as at when the person was in coma and things like that. So basically they are not things that are though there are things, we could say they are uncanny things, you understand, but basically these things, they truly exist. So now I'm going to use this image that I have that I have at the left side of my head, right up here, to analyze it further, and I want you to pay attention to it. So now we have it. Now when you look at this diagram, the diagram is called time energy waves field interaction. Time energy wave fields interactions. Now I want to share with you things that I have discovered by applying formula of everything, and how they are related to reality of the universe based on my research publication. Now, this curvature wave that we have right here, now you can see up here we have energy wave. It is written in red pen. Now the trajectory of that energy wave goes downwardly like this, but it is actually inversely related to the time wave. So the time wave is drawn in black pen, and so when you trace the line is inversely related to the line of energy wave. Now the curvature that we have right there, that is the curvature that we have in the formula of everything, where we have dt dm. dt dm is telling us the evolution, is actually showing us the evolution of time per mass convergence or per mass divergence. So now what I'm actually saying is that we can have evolution of time when we have, or we can have evolution of time per mass convergence, per mass formation, and as well we can have probably the recession of time per mass decaying mechanism. So now, right inside this curvature we have equilateral triangle. Please, the triangle that we have right here is equilateral triangle. So now here we have a line drawn diagonally up, and that line is drawn in black pen. That is the line that shows the constant speed of gravity. So by having that as action, there must be a reaction of energy trajectory, and we have that being drawn diagonally opposite to that the black diagonal line. So there we have the constant speed of light. So now, this line that we have is as a result of the linear solution that we have nested right inside the formula of everything. Now, the formula of everything is dt dm equal to capital Um plus 4m. Now, the capital Um plus 4m, that is the linear solution, and by having that to be linear, we could have the constant speed of gravity and as well have the constant speed of light. So now, by the time this gravity, the constant speed of gravity reaches the maximum peak level where we have the, this black circle at the top here, that is where we have mass convergence. But the mass convergence that we have right there is arbitrary mass worth at the classical level. Now, you know that classical gravity is free fall. Classical gravity is free fall. So by reaching the maximum level at the top, we're going to have spontaneous free fall. And the spontaneous free fall is going to be annihilation of suspended zeros. Because by applying formula of everything, the capital Um in that linear solution, which serves as strong conveying force, we suspend the weak conveying force, which is 4m, and we're going to have that suspension in form of zeros. So now, once we have the zeros being annihilated, we have instant trajectory. And then that is why we could have this vertical line right here. This vertical line at the middle, that is the trajectory, the instant trajectory of time. Now it is vertical, it is instant. Now this horizontal central line that we have right in the middle here, that represents the infinite trajectory of energy. So the horizontal line at the middle represents the infinite trajectory of energy, while the vertical line at the middle represents the instant trajectory of time. Okay, so now it is that instant trajectory of time that now closes the opening of the two diagonal constant speed of gravity and constant speed of light. And so we now have equilateral triangle where we have this red convergence in form of, smooth circle. The convergence we have there, it is called arbitrary mass worth, and that is instantiated at quantum level. So now this whole upper region, that is the classical realm, and then this lower region in red, right from the central horizontal line down, that is the quantum realm. Now right from the horizontal line up, that is the classical realm. So now there is one thing I want you to take note here. This black big circle formation, that is the arbitrary mass worth at classical level. Now this round big red circle, that is the arbitrary mass worth at quantum level. Now at classical level, there is this small dark circle formation where we have 2,277,250,000 kilograms. Now this mass worth that we have here, that is the real mass worth at classical level. Now this real mass worth at classical level, that is the corresponding classical mass worth. That is, if you supply the mass worth of electron in the formula, you will put the mass worth of electron in the place of that m. We have capital plus 4m. So electron's mass will replace the m in front of the 4 or at the back of the 4, and then it will replace m at the back of capital U. So when you substitute electron's mass in the place of the 2 m's, and then we apply the formula, that formula will give us this 2,277,250,000 kilograms. Now the result will be in kilogram. The result will be mass worth. You understand? So now from there we can get to know the corresponding classical mass worth of electrons' mass worth. So if we now use this classical mass worth in the place of the 2 m's in our formula, instead of getting the actual mass worth of electron, which is 9.109 times 10 raised power minus 31, we will get, the power of minus 32, just like I said earlier on. The reason that is so is because we have convergence here, arbitrary suspension. Then now, before the trajectory of time can break this, it will, the energy, the kind of energy that can break the suspension will have to be instant. And by having that instant trajectory of time, once we break through this quantum suspension, there is going to be radiation, and that will lead to decay of mass worth. And so we could see the effect of that decay by having minus 32 instead of 31. Now, I want you to take note that at the bottom, outside the time energy wave model, we have another circle. Let me shift this thing up so that we can see it. Yes. Now, you can see that we have a small circle right here, and that circle has the value of electron. It has the value of real electron's mass. Now this value is what this instant trajectory of time gets connected to, and that is what must be connected to as a missing piece that will give us that conscious sensation. So now the value that we have here is the antiparticle of electron. So now electron, when you look at the value that we have right here, 5.7 times 10 raised power minus 48, that is the value of the curvature. But the value of suspension is lower than the value this electron's mass worth is bigger than it. And that is telling us that mass worth of electron has to be right inside the nucleus. Now the nucleus at quantum level will be right after this quantum arbitrary mass suspension down to the edge of this energy curvature. So now by applying formula of everything and by reiterating the application, we get to know that right inside the nucleus we have mass accumulation, and the mass accumulation is actually towards the central point of the nucleus. So the mass gets bigger as it moves towards the central point of the nucleus. Now that mass that we have there could, serve as the real mass worth of, the proton and the neutron. But by applying formula of everything, the mass worth of electron is undefined. The mass worth of electron is undefined, and as a result of that, we could call the mass accumulation an arbitrary mass. That is, if we're considering to know the point at which the electron's mass will be instantiated. Now, the electron's mass will be instantiated immediately the time trajectory gets connected to the positron right outside the time energy wave model. Now, by having the positron, now how can we get to know that the positron is outside? Now, we know that the trajectory of mass accumulation is towards the central system of the nucleus, which will be towards this energy curvature. And so, Louis de Broglie says that we should always have a standing wave. And a standing wave is a kind of static and undulating wave. It's a static wave. So it is by having a standing wave that gets intersected to the curvature of energy wave. It is by having that we could, have suspension around the ground energy state. You understand? It is by that we could have the ideal suspension. You understand? And so the standing wave, the moment we have standing wave, there will be projection into the higher dimension. And so by having standing wave, if we're to have standing wave, then there is possibility for us to really go outside the substrate dimension, because the standing wave will align with the curvature of the energy such that we could have projection into the higher dimension, and by getting to higher dimension we can get connected to the positron, because the moment, probably maybe the positron would be electron, but the moment we get connected to it, there will be this flipping mechanism that will attract it towards the time energy wave system of the substrate dimension. And by having that flipped mechanism, we can now say that what is being connected to is positron. So positron is what we get connected to when the wave collapses. So now, in this sense, it is not that the wave is collapsed, but we have intersection of, we have a point where the angular momentum of mass formation align with the energy curvature to have the standing wave, and the standing wave is projected into higher dimension to retract positron into the substrate dimension. So now it is quite understandable the way I have explained, though it is so deep, it might not be quite understood at first instance. You understand? So as time progresses, you get to understand this concept. So basically, the flipping mechanism, we can see it everywhere. Now, we have this symmetric nature by having this equilateral triangle, and that is why it is possible for us to have all these symmetries in the universe as they are being proved by scientists. And also we know that we usually have violation of all these symmetries by latest experiments and things like that. So basically, when you look at this, you can see the asymmetric nature of the universe, and as well symmetric nature of the universe, because the asymmetric nature of the universe is embedded in the curvature. By having curvature, we have variation. And so the point where we have the nucleus is the point where there is curvature. So the suspension is limited at the point where the curvature of the minimum starts. And it also hints at the point where the curvature of the maximum, which at the top here, starts. So now, when you have angular momentum, definitely there is going to be changes in speed. And that is why in the nucleus we have compacted equilateral triangle. And by having compacted equilateral triangle, we're going to have accelerated momentum. Though that accelerated momentum is going to be constantly exerted. You understand? But basically the variation of such angular momentum will smoothen out the discrete nature of energy such that we will later have that standing wave that we align with the curvature. Now, at this central line, the curvature we have at the quantum level will make energy to be continuous, just as we have the flow of time at the classical level to be continuous. And that is the point where we can have a global now. There is more to it. There is possibility to have a global now. I will shed more light on that. In as much as we have vertical line, even though the vertical line has to be disruptive by nature, it is being elongated by the virtue of energy's infinity. And so that elongation is needed for us to have the needed bridge that can, bridge the divergence of classical mechanics to quantum mechanics. So right now, formula of everything has given us the solution. But now, I want to briefly open our eyes to the flipping mechanism. We have a equilateral triangle at the left side, though there is suspension right towards the edge here where we have inflationary suspension. Now, this formula of everything accounts for inflationary suspension and also accounts for neutron stars suspension in the black hole. So after the Big Bang, we have inflationary suspension. Before the singularity of the black hole, we have neutron stars suspension. So now we have this equilateral triangle right here at the left side. So the moment we have this instant trajectory of time beyond the quantum realm into the complex system, we have that flipping mechanism, and so we have that equilateral triangle being flipped. You can see that the triangle of the black hole is flipped. It is not the same thing as the triangle of the Big Bang. So now, up here, when you look at the classical realm, we have convergence of mass. But in the quantum realm, we have decaying of mass. And that is why right inside the time energy wave model, even right inside this equilateral triangle, there is no real mass worth of quantum inside, unlike the classical mechanics where we have the real classical mass worth inside. So now the real mass worth is outside, even outside the time energy wave model, and that tells you the decaying mechanism of the quantum realm. So there is no real mass worth right inside the system. The real mass worth is outside. So now you can see that asymmetric nature of the universe. So the mass convergence will lead to smooth trajectory, while that decaying mechanism of the quantum will lead to that discrete nature of the energy as we have it. And by having that momentum of the discrete energy will be shorter to that of the continuous flow of time. And so we're going to have the tilting effect of time peregrination towards the past, as as we have momentum away from the real classical mass world. Now you can see the effect of time right there. So basically that is that about it. Sotadeology is a novel field in science, and it's a field that deals with flipping mechanism of the universe artistically and scientifically. So that is that. I believe you are blessed with this. Remain blessed forever.